Welcome, I'm Christina Whitney, a studio educator with Handi Quilter. I would like to share with you some tips on using the Feeling Groovy ruler. Let's take a look at this ruler. You can see it's got grid lines throughout and it's got these 3 slots. And I'm going to show you the best way to use those slots to your advantage. When using your rulers, make sure you have a ruler base installed on your machine, as well as using a Surefoot, which will help prevent any damage to your machine with the ruler hopping over the hopping foot. Also, Handi Grip is a great tool that you can use to put on the back of your ruler, which will help your ruler stay in the position that you want it to be in. So let's go ahead and look at some designs for the Feeling Groovy ruler. One thing that I want to point out with the Feeling Groovy ruler is that the straight travel line is going to be at the top of your ruler. I kind of tend to get it a little bit backwards, so I just wanted to point that out so that you can make sure that you've got the ruler going the correct direction. I went ahead and drew a line on my quilt, so that could represent a seam on your quilt, and I'm going to line up this solid line with that line on the quilt. Taking your machine, you're going to stitch down into the groove and back up. Come across, down, up, and across. And you'll notice that you don't have anything up here stopping your machine. So you're going to need to go very slowly and make sure that you stop at that top point to come across before you come back down. Otherwise, you can tend to get more of a curved shape at the top. Another tip for using this ruler would be if you have Pro Stitcher, you can leave the gears engaged, and that helps kind of control your machine from getting away from you. Okay, so to do the bottom section, I went ahead and lined up the center of each of these slots, or the part here, with my previous stitch line. And then as I came in, I was stitching, alternating all the way across with the other side. So that's a fun design. That would be a great border. We're going to do that same thing, but instead of shifting the ruler over all of the way, I'm going to go down in this slot, come back up. I can shift the ruler over 1/2 an inch, 1/4 of an inch, whatever I want to do, and keep shifting. And you can see we've got some skinny piano keys, a little bit wider, and even a little bit wider. So you have different options of how you want to use your Feeling Groovy ruler. So far, we've used the full length of these grooves. We're going to change that up a little bit, and let's look at this design here. Now notice that I want this travel line to be at the bottom, so I'm going to turn the ruler over and place the bottom grid line on that line that I drew. And I'm going to go up into the slot. This one I went all the way, came back down, traveled over. This one I just went part way, came down. And every single one, if you look at this, I did them all different lengths. But now we've got this flower, and you think, oh, I don't want to go back and do the flower. So let me show you how I did that. I stitched up, and then I actually moved the ruler out of the way, stitched the flower, put the ruler back in position, stitch down, stitch over, same thing. Remove the ruler, stitch around, and you can do the same thing if you want to add a leaf on there. And I did that. That would be so cute in a border on a quilt. This design is pretty symmetrical, but again, I did not use the full length of the grid. So what you can do is take a piece of painter's tape and put the tape where you want to have your stitching stop. So on this one, actually I'm going to shift that up just a little bit. Stitch down, stitch across, down, all the way. I'm going to leave my needle in this position, flip the ruler around, and I had some grid marks already drawn on here to keep things horizontal and vertical and to line things up. Stitch up to where my painter's tape was, stitch down, across, up, down, across, and then I'm going to stop on this bottom one, flip the ruler over, and same thing. I'm going to stitch out, and I just continue doing that whole thing. I did use some travel lines to get from one point to another if I needed to, but that was a great use of the ruler. So let me show you one of my other favorite designs using this ruler. This would be great in borders. I used the ruler stitching these grooves at different lengths, so you notice they're not all the same length, and then coming back and drawing a spine on and filling in the rest of that space with feathers. So that is a really fun way to use the ruler. So let's actually stitch with this ruler so you can see what it does. You'll notice I have a line drawn here. If you're stitching on a regular quilt, you probably would have seam lines that you could use to line things up, but this is for demonstrative purposes. I'm going to get rid of that tape. Okay, so I've got it in position. I've got my handy grip on, and you're going to have to be really careful with your hand positioning on this ruler. Sometimes it gets a little bit tricky. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch down the groove. Make sure I get all the way into that point if I want the full length. I'm slowing down as I come across there, and then back down in the next groove. Now at this point I don't really have very much control over the ruler, so I'm going to shift my hand over. Come across. So that would be my stopping point, and I would shift the ruler over, travel across the top, and continue on. So that's our Feeling Groovy ruler. Have fun with it.